All right, let's dive into this one. The Beastmaster, huh? A 1982 fantasy film, and from what I hear, a real cult classic.
Yeah, it's got a certain charm, you could say.
We're working for this movie review you sent, and it sounds like it has some pretty interesting takes. Awking animals and over-the-top villain and all that 80s fantasy goodness. Should be fun.
Definitely. You know, one thing that jumped out at me right away was how it plays with that classic hero's journey thing.
Oh, you mean the whole village destroyed, hero out for revenge deal?
Exactly. But the Beastmaster adds this really interesting twist with the whole animal companion element.
Right, so we've got a tiger, we got a couple of ferrets running around, and an eagle too, right? Not your typical fellowship, that's for sure.
No, not at all. And I think there's some real symbolism going on there. It's like each animal represents a different part of Dar, the hero.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me.
Well, you've got the tiger, right? Obviously, that's pure strength, ferocity. Then you've got the ferrets, all sneaky and cunning. And the eagle, that's got to be vision, seeing the bigger picture.
Makes sense. It's like they're almost like extensions of himself, giving him all these extra abilities.
Exactly. And it really sets him apart from, your typical fantasy hero who's usually just swinging a sword around.
Speaking of swinging swords, we can't forget the villain, right? Maax, played by the one and only Rip Torn.
Oh, yeah, Rip Torn.
The review called his performance deliciously over the top. And honestly, I'm kind of excited to see what they mean by that.
Oh, he just chews the scenery in the best way possible. Every line, every sneer, it's like he knows exactly what kind of movie he's in.
So he's embracing the campiness of it all.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? It's infectious. You can't help but get swept up in it. But he's not just a one-dimensional bad guy either.
Really?
Yeah.
What makes him so interesting then?
Well, he's got his own motivations, his own messed up sense of justice, He thinks he's doing what needs to be done to keep things in order.
Even if his methods are a bit, shall we say, extreme.
Exactly. He's brutal, he's terrifying, but you kind of get where he's coming from. And that makes him way more interesting than just some, mustache-twirling villain.
So you've got this clash of personalities, almost philosophies,
yeah.
Right? You've got Dar, connected to nature, all about empathy. Then you've got Maax, all about power and control.
Right. And it's not just in their fighting, it's in how they relate to the world around them. Dar's connection to nature gives him this real edge, like he's tapping into something primal.
Which Maax, with all his sorcery and whatnot, just can't quite grasp.
Exactly.
And speaking of sorcery, the review mentioned some pretty wild creatures in this film. Makes me wonder about the special effects. Apparently, it's a mix of practical and some early CGI.
Oh, yeah. The CGI is definitely a product of its time. Let's just say that.
So not exactly cutting edge.
Not quite. But you know what? The practical effects are actually pretty impressive. The creature designs are really imaginative, and there's a certain charm to that old school hands-on approach.
It's like you can see the artistry, the effort that went into bringing those creatures to life.
Exactly. And there's something to be said for that, even if it doesn't always look perfect.
Now, we can't forget that The Beastmaster came out in 1982, right in the middle of that whole 80s fantasy boom.
Oh, yeah, big time. You had Conan, Clash of the Titans, all these sword and sorcery epics hitting the screens.
So how does The Beastmaster fit into all that? Was it just riding the wave, or did it bring something unique to the table?
Well, it definitely has all the classic elements, the muscular hero, the epic quest, the mystical creatures. But I think what sets it apart is that real emphasis on the natural world.
It's not just about conquering evil. It's about this guy who's deeply connected to nature and draws strength from that.
Exactly. And I think that speaks to something deeper going on in the culture at the time.
Like a yearning for something simpler, more primal, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Especially in a world that was becoming, more urbanized, more technology-driven.
And you see that not just in Dar's connection with his animal buddies, but also in the film's visuals. The review talks about these huge, sweeping shots of nature.
Oh, yeah, those landscapes are incredible. It's like nature itself becomes a character in the film.
And speaking of characters, the review also mentions these themes of fate and free will, like Dar is chosen for something. But also makes choices that kind of defy that destiny. How does that all play out?
That's a good question. And I think it gets to the heart of what makes this film more than just, a mindless action flick.
So it's actually grappling with some pretty big ideas.
Definitely. Like, does Dar actually control his own fate? Or is he just fulfilling some preordained destiny? That tension is what makes it so interesting.
It reminds us that even in a world with magic and monsters, it's still our choices that matter.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we've got this unique hero, a deliciously evil villain, a world full of crazy creatures, and some big ideas about fate and free will.
Yeah.
But we can't ignore the elephant in the room, right?
Well, you mean the giant bat creatures?
Maybe, but I was actually thinking about some of the criticisms leveled at the film. The review does mention some things, like the plot, for example. Some people found it a bit predictable.
Yeah, I can see that.
And the dialogue, well, let's just say the word cheesy was used.
Right. I think we should unpack that a bit more.
Sounds good.
Yeah, let's dive into that in the next part of our deep dive. So yeah, about that plot. It's true that it follows a pretty traditional hero's journey, right? Loss, vengeance, trials, the big showdown with evil, the usual stuff.
So it hits all the classic beats. But does it, do anything interesting with them? Or does it just feel like a rehash of other fantasy movies from that era?
Well, it's drawing from a lot of mythology and storytelling tradition, right? The hero's journey is like this archetype that people have been telling, well, forever.
Right.
But the Beastmaster takes that familiar structure and injects it with this fresh perspective, Yeah. I mean, Dar's connection to nature, his abilities, all that sets him apart.
So it's not just about some guy, hacking and slashing his way to victory. There's this, deeper level to it.
Exactly. And that connection to nature, it influences everything. It's not just about how he fights, it's how he thinks, how he approaches problems.
That's a good point. It's not just brute force. It's about strategy, using his smarts.
Right. And then there's the dialogue. I know the review mentioned it being, a little cheesy.
Yeah, cheesy was definitely the word.
Well, you got to remember, this is, a product of the 80s. Big hair, leg warmers, and, sometimes the dialogue was a little over the top.
Especially in those fantasy and sci-fi movies, right?
Oh, totally. And look, some of the lines might make you roll your eyes a little bit now, but honestly, I think it's part of the fun.
Yeah, it's like that cheesy dialogue has become part of its charm.
Exactly. It's like, it's so bad, it's good,
Yeah.
And let's be real, a little cheese every now and then can be pretty entertaining.
Okay, but speaking of entertaining, the review also mentioned this kind of tonal inconsistency in the film.
Oh, right.
It goes from these really dark, serious moments, human sacrifices, creepy sorcerers, and then all of a sudden, bam, we're watching Dar's ferrets playing around.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Do you think that was intentional or just, some uneven filmmaking?
What do you think?
Well, it's hard to say for sure. I mean, to really analyze it, you'd have to look at the whole structure, the director's choices and all that.
Right.
But maybe it was a deliberate choice, to keep the audience on their toes, to create this feeling of, unpredictability.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing then?
Not necessarily. I mean, it might be reflecting the chaos of Dar's journey, right? He's facing all these unexpected challenges, danger one minute, lighthearted fun the next.
Interesting. So it's like it mirrors the complexity of life itself?
Exactly. And speaking of complexity, I think it's worth mentioning the moral ambiguity in the film, too.
Oh, right. We talked about Maax and how he thinks he's doing the right thing, even though he's, totally ruthless.
Right. But even Dar, the hero, he has to make some tough choices.
Yeah, he's not just this perfect goody two-shoes character. He's got flaws. He makes mistakes.
Exactly. And I think that makes him way more interesting, more relatable.
Oh, for sure. Nobody wants to watch a perfect hero.
Right. It's that willingness to explore those gray areas that makes a story really good. It makes you think about what's right and wrong.
It reminds you that, that life isn't always black and white.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the plot, the characters, those tonal shifts, and even the moral gray areas. But I want to circle back to the special effects for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
We touched on the practical effects and the CGI, but the review also mentioned some puppetry in the film. How did that work out?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. Some of it is really charming, especially the stuff with the ferrets.
I can see that.
The puppets are really expressive, And those scenes with Dar feel genuine, like they're really interacting.
It's like those ferrets are little extensions of his personality.
Yeah.
Like mischievous little sidekicks.
Exactly. But then you have other parts where the puppetry feels, a little clunky.
The bat creatures.
Yeah, those haven't aged quite as well. It's like you can see the strings,
Yeah.
But again, I think it adds to the charm of the film. It's a reminder of how they had to do things back then, before computers could do everything.
Right. You had to be more creative, more resourceful.
Exactly. And I think there's beauty in that, seeing the artistry, the craftsmanship.
It's like a window into how movies used to be made.
Exactly. And I think there's a lesson there, Limitations can sometimes push you to be more innovative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like You got to work with what you've got. And sometimes that leads to some amazing results.
Right.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot here. The plot, the characters, the themes, even the special effects. And what's clear is that the Beastmaster is, well, it's more than meets the eye.
It really is. It's got those pulpy roots, you know? It's fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but there's this deeper layer there, this exploration of humanity and nature, the choices we make, all that stuff.
And it's definitely resonated with people. It's got sequels, a TV series, even a video game. Why do you think it's had such staying power?
Well, for some people, it's nostalgia, right? You know,
Right.
anyone who grew up in the 80s probably has fond memories of it, even if they haven't seen it in years.
It's like one of those movies that just sticks with you.
Yeah, it gets in your head. But I think it's more than that. It taps into those universal themes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The hero's journey, the power of nature, good versus evil. Those are things that resonate with everybody.
And it does it with this sense of adventure and fun that's, well, it's contagious. It's just a pure escape, you know? Swords, sorcery, talking animals. What's not to love?
Right. But like we said, it's not just mindless entertainment. It makes you think about our relationship with nature, about the choices we make, about what really matters.
Yeah, it works on different levels. There's something there for everyone.
Exactly.
So it sounds like we've done a pretty good job of unpacking the Beastmaster. Strengths, weaknesses, its place in history, all that. But before we wrap things up, I think it's important to remember that we're basing all this on a single movie review.
That's a good point. It's just one person's opinion, right?
Yeah, exactly. And movies, they're so subjective. What one person loves, another person might hate.
Exactly. So we've given you our thoughts based on this review, but ultimately it's up to you, the viewer, to decide what you think.
Right. That's the beauty of art, right? It gets people talking, thinking.
Absolutely. And it lets us find our own meaning in the stories that speak to us.
Well said. I think it's time to move on to our final thoughts and wrap this whole thing up. You know, throughout this whole deep dive, the one thing that keeps coming back to me is that connection between Dar and his animal companions.
Oh, yeah, that's what makes this movie, you know, really stand out.
It's more than just like a cool gimmick, right? It's like
Yeah.
it speaks to something deeper.
Absolutely. It's like this yearning for, I don't know, a connection with nature, something a lot of us feel, I think. Especially these days with all the technology and, well, the hustle and bustle of modern life.
Makes you wonder, right? Like if you could have an animal companion, what would it be? What kind of animal would you choose?
Would you go for like raw power, like a tiger, like Dar has?
Or maybe something more agile and stealthy, something that can, you know, sneak around and get into places you couldn't?
Yeah, maybe something with like super senses, you know, that could warn you about danger before you even see it.
Or what about like a really intelligent animal?
Yeah.
Something that could like solve problems and help you figure things out.
It's a fun question to think about, isn't it? What qualities would you look for in an animal companion? It kind of makes you think about, well, what you value, what you admire.
And maybe it makes you appreciate the animals around us a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for their unique abilities and, well, just for being part of this whole amazing interconnected web of life.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it brings us back to what makes the Beastmaster so interesting. It reminds us that we're part of something bigger than ourselves, that our connection to nature, it's not just, you know, a nice to have, it's important.
It's vital, really, for our survival, sure.
Yeah.
But maybe even for our, you know, our spiritual well-being too.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what elevates this film. It's got all the action and adventure and, yeah, even the cheesy parts.
But there's also this subtle message about respect, empathy, finding that balance with nature.
Yeah, and that's what makes it more than just, you know, a fun, mindless movie. It gives you something to think about.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the Beastmaster. We talked about the plot, the characters, the themes, even those sometimes questionable special effects.
Yeah, we really dug into it.
We explored how it fits into that whole 80s fantasy thing, talked about its strengths and weaknesses, and, well, tried to understand why it's still so popular today.
And hopefully, you know, we've given you a new perspective on it.
Maybe even inspired you to rewatch it, or maybe check it out for the first time if you've never seen it.
Definitely. And if you're looking for more films that blend action, fantasy, and, well, a little bit of environmental consciousness, there are tons out there.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
That's what it's all about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Beastmaster.
Until next time, happy watching.